Okay guys, I'm just going to quickly have a look at question 4 in the practice assignment. The question says, previous research has suggested that the average income in Australia is $45,000, but a government researcher has hypothesised that this is no longer the case. Use a one-sample t-test to test whether this is still the case. Provide the relevant output and write the report for your test in the style presented in the course materials. So we've been provided a reference mean, which means that we're going to be using a one-sample t-test because it's a metric variable and we know one of the population means already. We only need to estimate one of the other population means from the sample. So what we need to do is go into SPSS. We go up to Analyse, Compare Means, One Sample T-Test. We put our income variable into the test box. We make our test value 45,000 and we press OK. Here we have our results. So, we actually get given the confidence interval for one sample t-test. So here you can see the mean income for the sample is 64,283 rounded to whole integer, which is clearly well above 45,000, and our p-value is less than 0.05. So our sample comes from a population where the mean income is likely to be above 45,000. In fact, the mean difference, our best estimate of the difference in income between the reference mean of 45,000 and the population from which our sample was drawn is $19,283 rounded to a whole integer. We can be very confident that the actual difference in the population is somewhere between 11,363 and 27,000 greater than the reference mean of 45,000. So to write this up into a model report, into our report, again we use the model reports from the textbook as a guide. I showed you in the previous video how to look that up in the index at the back of your book. And so then once you have done that, we can have a little look together. First of all, let's talk about the report. So once you have done that, you can write your report. So you can dump the output boxes from SPSS into your data file. So I showed you how to do that in the last video, but basically you right click, press copy special, unclick these, click image, press OK, and that will have copied, and then you can dump that table in here by pressing Control V. Put it in the cell of that table. Hold on a second. Control V, for example, okay, which is exactly what's being done above. So here's our actual report. So again, we have our hypothesis, then we describe the sample and the sample statistics, compare the sample statistics to the reference statistics, say the type of test used, provide the results of the test with supporting statistics, provide the confidence interval, and provide the conclusion. So we've said it was hypothesised that the average income in Australia is no longer $45,000. In a random sample of 30 Australians, or you might say 30 Australian cell phone owners, although the cell phone aspect is no longer particularly relevant, 30 Australians is fine. The average income, now notice the continued use of the word average throughout this report because we're measuring averages. The average income was $64,282, and there's the standard deviation. Now that has come, $64,282. The standard deviation of $21,208. Now, in statistics, we usually round to 2 decimal places, but for something like income, it's not particularly meaningful to round to 2 decimal places, and you won't be marked down on rounding. However, I would suggest you do round. If you're unsure, round to 2 decimal places just to make sure. Okay, we've got our hypothesis, description of the sample, our sample statistics, and then we compare this to the reference mean. So this is higher, let's highlight this, higher than the average income of $45,000 suggested by previous researchers. And now we say the type of test, and a one sample t-test shows that this difference in mean income is significant. So the type of test and the results of the test is significant. Make sure you say the difference in mean income and then you give the stats. So T, 29, so 29 is the degrees of freedom, which is provided here. T in brackets 29 equals 4.98, and P should be P is less than 0.001. You never write P is less than 0.00 because that's saying P is less than 0. Probability is not going to be less than 0, obviously. So you need to say P is less than 0.001. And then the 95% confidence interval indicates the average income has increased by between $11,364 and $27,202, which is from here. So rounded $11,364 and $27,203. And then referring back to the hypothesis with as expected, because the data is significant and the direction of the difference is in the direction we predicted, but as expected, the average income is no longer $45,000. Now, notice that our hypothesis wasn't directional. We just said it was hypothesized that the average income is no longer $45,000. We didn't say whether it was going to go up or down, and so our conclusion just says the average income is no longer $45,000. We don't say as expected the average income is greater than $45,000 because that's not what was predicted. But we can finish the hypothesis by adding the extra. We can finish our conclusion by adding the extra information. It has increased. So this statement that it has increased is not linked back to the hypothesis. That wasn't the hypothesis, but it is relevant because it's part of the conclusion. The as expected, the average income is no longer $45,000 is a reference to the hypothesis because that's what was hypothesized. Notice again that the 95% confidence interval and the conclusion are about the population, so they're both in present tense using the words has and is, not was and whatever, past tense, whereas the rest of the report is using past tense because that's about the sample. Okay. Now, if we tried to find some model reports for the one sample t-test in the textbook, we would open the textbook, take a moment to open, and we would start by going to the index like I showed you before, and then we can go to one sample t-test on the next page, and you can see it says one sample t-test model reports 42, 44, 45, 78, quite a few different model reports. So there's an example model report, and you can see it has the structure, hypothesis, information about the sample, whether the t-test is significant or not with appropriate statistics and the type of test used, 95% confidence interval, and the conclusion. Okay, good luck.